Hi guys, and welcome back to Sacrificially Speaking. We're so glad to see you once again.
Yep.
Today's is really fun. So today's episode is going to be on the liberalization of college.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, see, isn't that a good topic though?
Where are we getting these topics?
My brain. I actually really like writing episodes. I like writing, so this is
Please, somebody, for the love of God, send in questions.
They do send in questions, but I take their questions and I up them because you need hard questions.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, are you ready?
Again, I never know what we're going to talk about.
No.
So I am not responsible for the comments that are about to come out of my mouth.
All right. Yeah, well, my questions are just as bad. I'm not anybody to you.
Oh,
All right. How did we go from Harvard, Yale, and Princeton being founded as seminaries to those safe campuses now promoting witchcraft, sexual confusion, and deconstruction theology?
Oh, let's just start off with that.
Let's
Okay.
just hit it straight off to that.
Well, it's been a very long process. You know, as you know, I've helped in multiple universities,
Yes.
colleges,
Seminaries.
sat on the board of seminaries. I can tell you that it's actually been a very long process.
Mhm.
And I also can tell you, believe it or not, contrary to what people think, it has been a very strategic process by administrations and powers that be to change the mindset of the culture and to form their thinking into where they want them to go for their own good and personal benefit. I'm trying to be very careful here because I help work alongside political circles, and so there's some things I could say right now that
I'm
I
going
know.
to get him as close to getting in trouble
Yeah.
as I possibly
There's
can.
things I
Don't
can
you
say
worry.
right now that I'm not allowed to talk about, but I can just tell you there has been a systematic targeting of agendas
Mhm.
and thought patterns that unfortunately many of these great colleges who turned out some of the greatest leaders in the history of our world, especially religious leaders in the early days of America, have just went way off track, totally off what they were founded to do. Very, very sad to me, but it hasn't been accidental. It hasn't been, contrary to what people are thinking, it hasn't been an evolution of thinking and
Or
thought.
students or anything like that.
Actually, there's nothing new under the sun. All error is old heresy revisited.
Mhm.
So it's ancient thinking that's come back around, but it's being put in textbooks as fact, Anyway, I need to get off of it because I could get in trouble here saying too much, but it has been systematic.
Is the erosion of the biblical worldview in universities a symptom of a broader spiritual war?
Yes. So yes and yes. Again, it has been intentional, but it's demonic. And when you really look at what's going on behind the scenes, there's no other explanation other than just demonic. It's satanic in its approach. Again, let's go all the way back to the beginning. In the beginning, when God created man and put him in the Garden of Eden, there were two trees in that garden. One was the tree of life. The other was the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Mm-hmm. So, knowledge is a very wonderful thing, but can also be a dangerous thing, right?
Yeah.
So knowledge of good is wonderful, but the knowledge of evil is also equally wonderful and equally demonic. And again, there's a lot that comes out of that because religion comes out of that, right?
Yeah.
The good side of that tree says you do this makes you right with God.
Yeah.
The bad side of that tree says, hey, you can do anything you want to do. There is no God. And so, whenever you go down that path, there's this incredible extreme. And it's been going that way from the beginning. It doesn't take long till you get to where you're all the way at the Tower of Babel, and man is building a tower to the heavens, basically to usurp the authority and the knowledge of God. And man still tries to do that today. And it's a very dangerous thing when we drift like that. But yeah, I mean, it's intentional, it's demonic, it's definitely spiritual. There's no other reason why in the world would you want to be attacking Jewish students.
Yep. So we've identified that higher education is one of the enemy's strategic targets or attacks. Why specifically? I mean, you discussed some of that knowledge background, but culturally for the U.S., why would that be a strategic attack in those specific in the higher universities?
Because where the mind goes, everything else goes. So you have to form the thinking of a generation, a group of people, to move them in a certain direction. Again, people are going to be shocked by this, but much of what we're getting now in our modern educational system is actually coming out of Europe.
Yeah.
It's old stuff coming out of Europe.
Yeah, Enlightenment age stuff.
Yeah,
really.
Enlightenment age stuff. So, and many of the philosophies that have really honestly destroyed, and I'm not saying every country is this way because I've been around the world and there's beautiful countries with wonderful people, but a lot of the mindsets that we're adopting now in the United States, they're not new. It's not revolutionary. This is not revolutionary thinking.
No, every single thing that we have to attack biblically from our culture, we can find examples in the Bible. We can find examples in early church history.
Yeah, I mean,
nothing is ever new.
Really, the I'll tell you, when this really, really exploded on the scene, you go all the way back to ancient Greece.
Yeah.
That's when it really exploded.
And especially because they had a lot of the sexual immorality and confusion and those kind of things that is so big in our culture now.
I mean, and in Rome, Nero was a pedophile.
Yeah.
He was a schizophrenic pedophile. Mm-hmm. And pedophilia was accepted in many of those cultures, and that's where we're going now. Eventually, again, you hear me say this often, but it's hard for people to grasp this. There is no, the basement, the bottom of the basement of the depraved mind has never been plumbed. I mean, there is no telling how far a man or a woman can go in perversity. And I'm not talking about just sexual stuff. I'm talking about everything.
Yeah.
The perversity. I mean,
that's just really evident in our culture right now in that specific sphere.
In the time I grew up, Jeffrey Dahmer was considered the most grotesque thing that I'd ever heard of.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I've now am hearing things that make him look, he still looks horrible and evil, but makes him not look as bad. And it's quickly descending into that. Again, there's no depths to the depraved mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. A man left to his own ways is a dangerous thing.
Okay. So I went to a hiring school in Philadelphia. So I have some experience.
She's Ivy League, but she's smarter than me. That's what she's trying to say.
I didn't graduate, so. Anyway, I have some experience in that kind of atmosphere though. And I hold the belief that those people aren't necessarily I don't see them as negatively as I think often Christian culture does.
Right.
How do we separate the ideas being taught to individuals from the actual individuals? Because I think that's kind of important if we're going to take the basis of Christianity as in they can be saved, if that kind of makes sense.
Well, normally I would say we have to be as educated. We need to be educated. We know how to give an answer for what and why we believe what we believe. We have to be able to speak from an informed perspective. Most Christians don't. They just get up there and Bible thump, quote scripture, but they can't talk intellectually. They can't debate intellectually. This is the reason I love Charlie Kirk and all these other guys like that, because at least they're willing to go to college campuses and make students think about some of the stupid stuff they're saying and believing.
Yeah.
Right? Now, are those bad people? No, I don't think they're bad people. And I think there's a lot of educators up there that, you know, in their heart, they're doing what they believe is good.
Yeah.
And you know, they're probably living good lives, and they want what you and I want. They want good families and things of that nature, not understanding that the beliefs become behaviors. Doctrines always turn into deeds. And when you teach things like moral relativism,
Yeah, which is a big thing in these universities.
Yeah.
I learned it in every
well, that's
philosophy class.
yeah, that is the source of all of what's going on right now.
Yeah.
And so there is no, now, if everything is morally relative, then there's no way for me to define right for wrong, good from evil, because what's right for you is right for you, whether I think it's right or not, whether the Bible says it's right or not, or even whether the law says it's right or not. And in some cultures, that's okay. In some cultures, it's okay for a man to take a 10-year-old girl and make him his wife.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
A 40, 50-year-old man who has multiple wives to take a 10-year-old girl and do what he's about to do to her and make her his wife? But in that culture, they have believed that lie. It has been taught. And where we're headed is way beyond that. Because, again, there's no depth to the depraved mind.
Yeah, and I think especially coming back to that, one of my favorite deans at the school that I went to, she works for the Episcopal Church, but she's married to a woman, so she's gay. But in the Episcopal Church, that's perfectly acceptable.
Right.
And she was a really sweet person, and I really she thinks she's doing everything right. She's a leader in a church. She's you know what I mean. And she was always a really nice person. She really supported her students, that kind of thing. Everyone loved her on campus. And so, for me, coming back to those kind of things, it's hard, I believe it's the same, because anything the Bible says is a sin. But the Bible's right, I'm, everyone else is wrong, whatever. But I think it's kind of, especially coming back to Tennessee, and, everything is more conservative-based. And I think a lot of people here that haven't spoke to people, a lot of people here have not experienced people that think that far differently from them, and they've kind of villainized them.
They've not learned to separate the problem from the person.
Yeah. And it's easy when you don't...
Excuse me.
You're good. It's easy when you don't know somebody that, thinks that way, to villainize a political group.
Sure. And I think that's equally wrong.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's equally wrong. But what makes my heart sad is much of the ideology that they have believed into, they didn't even choose, even though they think they chose. It was actually imposed on them by strategies.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds really, I sound like a conspiracy theorist.
Well, at this point...
Most of the conspiracies I share have been turned out to be right.
Yeah. Now, if you start, trying to convince us to put tinfoil in our head, I think I'm going to diff on that one. But some of the conspiracy theories...
I'm not in that tinfoil.
Yeah.
I did share a hammock with Bigfoot last night.
Come on. Anyway.
That's going to make Twitter. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, because they're going to be like, this dude's insane.
This dude's nuts.
What does it mean that some of the most respected institutions are not just against Christianity, but hostile, whatever that, towards Christianity?
Well, it's because Christianity is a threat to the concept and the ideology at the very base of moral relativism, which is a hydra-headed monster. So moral relativism will create this issue, cut that issue off, and then it creates 2 or 3 heads to replace this issue, because it never stops.
No, because it's relative to every single person.
But Christianity, in its purest form, there's absolute right, there's absolute wrong.
Yeah.
There's absolute truth, there's absolute error. And when you have that, for those on that side of the equation, to their defense, on that side of the equation, they look at it kind of like a kid looks at a parent. You don't have a right to tell me what to do. I'm a teenager. I'm almost an adult. I can do what I want to do. I'm big enough to do what I want to do. But the parent knows better because the parents lived some things, proved some things, tested some things, and therefore he knows this is true, this is false. But it's that way with God. So I think there's this natural animosity to Christianity because our stance in the fact that there are moral absolutes that cannot be tampered with.
Should more young Christians be pursuing leadership and faculty roles at higher education institutions to reclaim territory?
Oh, absolutely. I think Christians need to get into, be involved in every sphere of the culture. You can't change the culture from the outside in. You change it from the inside out. Honestly, that's how they did it.
Yeah.
They changed it from the inside out. They invaded our institutions of higher learning and pushed the dogma. So we need to do that. The dilemma we're facing is now these institutions have been structured in such a way as not to hire you.
Yeah.
And not to promote you. So you can be brilliant, intelligent, and highly educated and qualified, overly qualified, but you will be looked over because of your concept of moral absolute.
Yeah.
And it's a sad case. And so, yeah, I think we need more apologists. So if I was going back to school today in the area of theology, I would go into apologetics and I would try to become so brilliant that I could just about, in a godly way, discuss and argue for the side of the gospel on any point in secular society. Sometimes I grieve that I did not spend more time in apologetics.
But I mean, to be fair, when you were coming in the 80s, that wasn't as big as it is now, is it?
It was, but only in small circles.
Yeah.
So, you didn't have those media platforms where you could get on social media and do what we're doing now. That was not the case. But right now, if I was a young person, so I think the greatest preachers of our time right now, and I know this is going to offend some, are the Charlie Kirks. And Ben Shapiro's, that even though I know he's Jewish and he's not Christian, but some of these people, and I disagree with a lot of the language, and I don't listen to it.
I disagree with a lot of it.
But I don't have to agree with that. But I think a lot of these guys many of them who used to be extremely liberal, that now come over to the other side, that are fighting for truth.
Yeah.
They possibly could very well be some of the greatest preachers of our day. And I know that's going to make a lot of religious folks.
Where they lose me is like the same place that like really old school preachers lose me is because here's the thing, I'm on your side, so I hate it when I feel like I'm being like yelled at. You know what I mean? So sometimes that kind of loses me.
Yeah.
But
well, and that's the reason I like some of these guys that will sit at the campus and just ask questions.
Yeah.
Which is brilliant. That's brilliant apologetics because now you're forcing them to have to think for themselves, and they box themselves in. And somebody who's really gifted and really knowledgeable can know how to win those arguments. Now, will you win the person?
Maybe.
Maybe not. But at least they have to walk away from there with truth, right?
Yeah. Okay. How have Christian colleges began to mimic secular ideologies that they were built to counter?
Oh my gosh. Well, they're becoming almost as liberal as many of those colleges. And there's a reason for that, is they get federal funding. And so certain administrations, and again, I'm not going to get over into that because this will get me in trouble, but certain administrations have made sure that they went out of their way to fund only liberal ideologies. So now, like for example, in some states, which I've sat on boards of, some states are actually saying, if you don't allow transgender or homosexual teachers, we're going to pull
the funding.
Your funding as a Christian university. So now Christian universities, not so much so now under this administration, but Christian universities were scrambling, trying to figure out what to do.
What role do donors, accreditation boards, and public perception play in shaping what's allowed at Christian colleges?
Way more than you think. Yeah, it's the golden rule. Whoever has the gold rules. And so I've actually sat in board meetings where financiers and donors have said, if you don't push this particular item, we're not going to fund what you're doing, or we'll withdraw our donation. And so schools rely on those things to build funds, trust funds, to operate them for the future, to expand campuses and things of that nature. But what's happened now is you have places like Harvard and Yale and others that they have unlimited resources because of the wealth that's come out of there. People have come out of there that have amassed
their endowments,
unbelievable amounts of wealth, and their endowments are so large that they don't necessarily rely on the government funding or not. And so I know right now on the news we're talking about Harvard losing money. Yes, it's a big deal because I believe the government should be funding certain things. If a college is going to not protect students, Jewish students, Christian students, Muslim students, gay students, if a child can't go and get an education without being beat up or accosted, and you're not going to protect them, pull their funding.
Yeah.
That's a civil rights issue, right? So I completely agree with that. But the problem is places like Harvard and others are basically saying,
we're just going to do what we want anyway, which is why they pulled their international student visas. Exactly. That got their attention.
Exactly.
All right. Well, the next question is, and last question is, do government policies that limit access to education, like they've been doing, or like everyone's claiming that they do, so the loan forgiveness loopholes, the DEI reform, the now international student issues, do those help or hurt the long-term goal of reclaiming academia from a Christian standpoint?
Are you asking it from the conservative action that's being taken, or are you asking it overall, just the overall question, should we be dealing with it like this?
Overall question.
Okay. Yeah. So again, because I'm in certain circles and part of some of those conversations, not all, but some, and familiar with a lot of stuff, I can honestly say that if you were a person of faith, a lot of stuff was weaponized against people of faith in the educational world. Mm-hmm. And it's just playing out right now with Jewish people, but it's also with Christian people. Look how you were picked on, made fun of because of your beliefs, right? And I've even had students come to me and say, I have a professor that I submitted a paper, and they told me that if I don't rewrite the paper and take this Christian perspective out of it, that they're not going to let me to pass the class.
Oh yeah, I'm literally about to take an English class, and my options were a professor who her professional research is in gender studies, or I can take a professor that averages a C in the class, and I thought I'd rather take the chance of getting a C than have to deal with this.
Yeah, so my viewpoint is the whole system needs to be turned on its head because it's become an ideologue. It's become something that is being used to push agendas and not education. Yeah. I mean, we got high school students that are graduating high school can barely read
Yeah, because
and write and don't know how to
you're
get.
just pushed along.
They're just pushed along, and there's a reason for that. The more kids go through that school, the more money that you get per child, and it's become a business. And so, I think anything that we do that can reform education. Now, what I'm not for is I'm not for forcing my Christian ideology down everybody's throat either.
But I don't think that's the correct way to actually get people saved.
We should be a country of free speech, but we should also be a country where everything is respected, right? And so, I mean, I know of some schools where Muslims have been attacked.
Yeah.
And we're talking about Muslim students just because of their faith. Yeah. Now, even though I'm not a Muslim and would vehemently disagree with the Muslim religion and the basis of that religion, I still respect their right to worship God the way they feel led, because that's how our founding fathers established this country.
Yeah.
And if I'm interested in reaching them, then I need to do what I got to do to figure out how to take the Word of God and my belief system and figure out how to work it into a conversation or a lifestyle or something. So I'm not against teachers being able to teach because they believe a certain way. Yeah. I'm not against that. But I also don't think that there's certain things we ought to be doing right now. Like, for example, I don't want my first grader grandson to be learning about sexual orientation.
Yeah, that's absolutely ridiculous.
He's concerned about dinosaurs.
Yeah, and the Lion King.
And the Lion King. He likes dinosaurs and Lion King. He don't need to be having sex ed classes in first grade.
Yeah.
Now, do we need to ignore it altogether? No, because the average sexual encounter for a young person in America is 11 years old.
Yeah.
So, some point in there, we need to do something. But I think that is a parent's responsibility. And I think there ought to be some, when I say some teaching, there ought to be some basic biological teaching.
Yeah.
About certain things.
We're like, hey, you will get pregnant.
Yeah, I mean, basic biological teaching. But we ought not be pushing agendas. Yeah. You know, we ought not be handing out condoms and encouraging an ideology that is going to hurt them down the road. I mean, and it's stupid for us to do this when we know that a child that is fatherless has a greater chance of growing up impoverished, living in poverty, not being a great contribution to society, possibly living incarcerated the rest of their life, and yet we're handing out condoms and telling them this is okay. And then we don't understand why our prisons are filling up. So,
because we're just replicating the issue over.
Yeah, so I think there's some reform. I am 100% for, well, this is going to make some folks mad. I'm 100% for school choice. I think a parent should have a right to say, I want to go to this school. Why can't it?
Yeah.
Because this school is not taking my child in the direction educationally that I feel like they need to go.
Yeah.
And it should be 100%. Now, I believe that should be monitored, and there should be a certain level of expectation of academic excellence.
Yeah.
We don't need to be raising ignorant children because we won't teach them, and we want to let them run around and not actually have classroom time. But still, nonetheless, I would be all for that, you know. And even if you're taking them out of one school into another public school, and it's just public school, it's because this public school is horrible.
Yeah.
And if your child is in this public school, they're at a disadvantage. Where are all the civil rights people?
Yeah.
That normally would be complaining about that. But you don't hear them talking about.
No, we literally have feeder schools. I mean, everyone knows that.
Yeah, you're not hearing them. You're not hearing them talk about school choice and why that's important. Because they got to hold to a certain party in politics, right? And they do it at the sake of the future of generations and their family line. So those things hurt my heart because, you know, on a certain level, we've got to compete with the world. And we can't do that with a bunch of imbeciles running around that don't know how to even add and subtract. And I mean, when you go into a convenience store and you give a teenager, you're buying $75 worth of gas, and you give a teenager a $100 bill, and they literally have to take out a calculator and figure that out, how much change they owe you. Pretty sad.
Yeah.
Okay? Anyway.
All right. Well, that is all that we have time for.
Making
this
friends,
episode.
influencing people. That's what we do.
We're so good at it.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's all the time we have for this episode, but we're so glad that you joined us today. As always, like, subscribe, follow, keep up with us. Everything is at Sacrificially Speaking, and we want to hear from you, so definitely comment. I love interacting with y'all, so I want to see you in the comments, and I think that's all we have.
Yeah, she brings all of these hard questions to me that I have no idea I'm getting ready to discuss because of y'all. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
It's fine. He loves it. He really does. So anyway, that's all we have, but we will see you in the next one.
Have
Bye.
a great